tomorrow because really moving forward because you guys will be meeting with career services and I want to try to respect everybody's time and get them in and out so that they can go on and start to meet with their respective teams. So we're going to talk a little bit about interviewing. We'll do chapter 10 today and tomorrow in preparation for your practice interview on next week. And also obviously for, your interviewing in the future. And chapter 10, it discussed different types of interviews. We'll really focus on today, just I guess the administration part of interviewing. Tomorrow would be really critical because we're going to dig into all those different types of questions, what they expect of you in an interview, how to answer all those questions, how to prepare for all those questions. And I promise you, by the time tomorrow ends, you will be a pro at interviewing. So before we get into that, so let's just discuss then just the administration part of interviewing. We all know that at some point in the application process, someone's going to ask you to interview, right? That's a great thing, right? It's the employer's opportunity to learn about you and really to make sure what they read on your resume is, it's accurate because sometimes, they can read into your resume or maybe you may have experience, but maybe it's not the exact experience that they were looking for. And they won't really know that until they talk to you, or sometimes they may think that you don't have exactly what they're looking for, and then they talk to you and they realize, oh no, the person does have it. So the interview is really an opportunity for them to get a sense of, exactly what your skill set is and if you will be a good fit to fill the need that they have at that time. When you're interviewing, guys, when you're actively looking for a job, make sure, and this may sound crazy, but make sure your voicemail box is empty. Make sure that you're answering the phone politely. We all don't like calls that we don't know. I have been guilty of, answering an email that seemed like spam and it wasn't. The guy was so cryptic, I didn't know what he wanted, and he was, saying I wanted to, have you signed up for an interview or something he was doing, but then that didn't even really happen. But so maybe that's why I was suspicious in the first place, but you just never know who's reaching out to you and who's calling. So always make sure that you are using, proper etiquette if you're on the job hunt. I've also been guilty of not having my voicemail box empty, and I had someone reach out to me and say, Miss Taylor, we're trying to set you up for an interview. We have to text you because your voicemail box is full. And another time, this is throughout the years, a situation where I hadn't set up my voicemail because I had a new phone and I've been guilty of not setting up my voicemail, right? And they're like, well, your voicemail box is not set up. I'm like, oh my goodness, right? So you just want to make sure that you have all that stuff taken care of. And then also check your spam. We've all, missed emails because it's gone to our spam. A lot of times when these companies use these ATS systems and the computer is the one that's telling you you're going to go to the next step, sometimes your email system, especially if you have like Google, will block it or they'll send it to spam because it looks like it's a spam. It doesn't look like it's a real person that's reaching out to you, and essentially it's not a real person reaching out to you. So check your spam because sometimes your email will send it something like that to spam and you don't want to miss an opportunity. When you do get offered an opportunity to interview, I want you to understand that there's different types of interviews. There are screening interviews. There are what we call our normal structured interviews, sitting in a conference room type thing. And then there are unstructured interviews. Fortunately or unfortunately, in the trades, you guys end up having all three, and I'll explain what that is in a minute. So when it comes to a screening interview, what is that? Well, it's a preliminary informal interview designed just to make sure, once again, that what they're reading on your resume, I know it sounds crazy, but like I said to you, people put, people lie on their resume. Yes, they do that. So they want to make sure, HR doesn't want to be embarrassed if, they didn't screen your interview closely, because they're passing your resume closely. They're passing your resume on to the hiring manager. Most times HR is not the one that is making the decision to bring you on. They are recruiting on behalf of your supervisor. And so they have to say, okay, here are 5 viable candidates, only to find out that you weren't viable at all. It kind of makes them look bad. So they want to make sure that, you're a viable candidate before they set up an interview for you with the hiring manager. You'll know it's a screening interview because if you get some type of email or phone call for an interview, they'll typically say it's only going to be 15 minutes. Most times they won't want to see you because they're doing this with a lot of people. So they'll say it's a phone call, or they'll say, they'll say sometimes it'll be video, but most times it's a phone call, right? And that is a telltale sign that it's just HR. Not that it's a bad thing, because that's your first introduction to that company, and so you do want to make a good impression. It can go either way. Some of them, it depends on how big the company is, how many of these calls they have to make. Some of them are really quick, like you think that you're about to have at least a 15-minute phone call, and it's like 3 minutes, 5 minutes. Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Okay, bye. You're like, what is that? Other times, you'll get someone that's a little bit more informative. They'll tell you about the company. They'll tell you, what the project is. They'll explain to you who you'll be working with. Some of them will even talk to you about money. We'll learn that we don't really talk about money until the end. But some of them, especially if they have a tight budget, or if they start everybody out with the same amount of money. Sometimes these guys have government contracts, and if you're working on a government contract, the government actually sets the rate. A lot of people don't know that. They'll say, you're paying this person, this technician or whatever, you know, 35 bucks an hour, and the government sets that rate. So, they'll tell you. Now, of course, they still try to negotiate down from that, those little greedy boogers. But oftentimes, they won't go above that. So they'll tell you, this is the rate. So there are instances where they don't change the rate, and they'll let you know out the gate. But for the most part, they won't really talk about money. And that's not something you should really bring up before the end of an interview anyway. And we'll explain why tomorrow. But most companies will at least have some type of salary range on the job description. And I'm sure if you guys, were doing your project from Thursday, you may have noticed that, right? So you may have noticed some salary ranges. Most of them won't put, this is what this pays. They'll put a salary range because they have to meet you and know exactly where you are. Like I said before, you guys are all in a program, but you're not all the same, right? Some of you come with a lot of experience in one, arena. Somebody else comes with experience in another. So, unfortunately or fortunately, depends on how you want to look at it. But in business, we don't all get paid the same. You can have 2 accountants sitting next to each other making something totally different. It's one of the reasons why they don't want you talking about money on the job. And a lot of that just has to do with, that person may have an extra skill set that may or may not be needed for that position, but the company may feel like, okay, well, if this person has all this experience, they can bring something extra to the table. There won't be as much turnover. There won't be a need for, training and a lot of oversight. So as you can imagine, if I hire 2 HVAC technicians, but one's been doing it for 4 years and one's just starting, I'm probably going to pay the one that's been doing it for 4 years more. That makes sense. Some people say, oh, we're doing the same job. Yeah, but you're not doing it the same way, right? This person is going to bring 4 years of experience that you don't have yet. They're going to be able to solve problems that you're going to be asking questions about, right? You can't ever compare yourself to someone else. But people tend to do that because they're thinking we're doing the same job. Yeah, you're doing the same job, but you're not doing it the same way, right? Sometimes the person with new experience may even do it better. Who knows? But that's how you prove yourself. But the way business works, you get paid based on your experience. Sometimes, a person that is new on a job may get paid a little bit more, not because they have that experience, but because they bring something else to the table. Maybe this person, you know, like in my field, for example, um, I work in government contracting for a lot of years, but I also have law experience. So someone else that does contracting, they don't have a law degree, I'm going to get paid more if I have a law degree versus if they don't, even though we're both still doing contracting, right? So everybody is different. And so just know that. But the screening interview is all about you showcasing what you have really quickly. Sometimes you can get a little bit of information from these people, and obviously you want to know as much as possible, especially like who's going to interview you and what do they want to see. Not really what they want to see, but something about that person. I'm gonna tell you what I do. When they tell me who I'm gonna meet with, I go and I Google them. I go to LinkedIn and I try to see who I'm gonna interview with because I just don't like surprises and I want to know, what is this person about? So it's one of the reasons why, you may want to ask, oh, okay, I'm meeting with Sam, Smith. Okay, thank you for that. I'm gonna go look up Sam Smith. But outside of that screening interview, the next step will be the structured interview. Now, the structured interview is where they're going to sit down with you and they're going to, ask you, a series of questions. This is a very standard process because they have to compare you against the next guy. So one thing that allows them to compare apples to apples, if you will, is to ask everyone the same set of questions. So these questions are structured questions. Sometimes they could be like 10 questions that they're going to ask everyone because they have to, most times the hiring manager, and this is all, based on corporate, right? So there could be outliers like you're working for a small company and the manager is the boss, so this doesn't apply, right? They don't have to ask anybody. But for most corporations, they have to sit down and compare this candidate versus that candidate. So they're going to have some type of structured process where they ask each candidate the same series of questions. We call this a directive interview. The most common type of interview most of us are familiar with. And these series of questions come in three different categories, which we'll learn about tomorrow. And they're designed to, again, not just learn more about you, but also compare your skills that you have compared to the skills that they need, right? So for those of us that are in tech, typically you may start out in like an office setting, sometimes a corporate office, some wherever, doing this structured interview. And then what will typically happen is you'll move to an unstructured interview. Even if they tell you, it's also known as a working interview. Well, no, you're just going to do a working interview. We're just going to have you come in for a few hours and demonstrate. Even with that, normally they'll still start out with some type of structured interview. They're not just going to say, hey, Tom, go to work, right? They're going to be like, okay, let's sit down, let's talk. So typically you'll have some type of structured process and then you'll move into an unstructured. Other times you may have a structured interview first and then come back for an unstructured interview. It just depends, right? So, but what is an unstructured interview? It's less formal. It's not as, corporate, if you will. Sometimes they'll walk you around the site. Let's say that you're going to be on a project and you're going to be working downtown at this new site. So they may have you meet at the site and they may walk you around the site and they may ask you a series of questions during the tour, something like that. If you're in the VA program, they may say, wear your scrubs. We're going to have you engage in the office for an hour or two to see how you're able to do. Right. So that's what an unstructured interview looks like. Your tech instructor should be telling you, or they probably have mentioned to you, or even your career services, the type of interview that you should prepare for. Now, my friends, this goes without saying, but please, please, please do not go to someone's job, especially the more corporate that you get, and don't know anything about the company. It's very important for you to know about the company. If you read a job advertisement and they're saying, oh, we need this person, because we got this new project, sometimes they'll say, okay, with this new project at this company, we need this new position. Try to do some research, go to their website, learn about who the company, definitely know who's the boss, please, and nothing else, because they will assume you know that much, right? A lot of times it'll come up in the conversation and they won't even, make reference to the person being the boss. They just assume you know stuff. Oh yeah, Mr. Derek. You're like, who's Mr. Derek? Mr. Derek could be the CEO. So at least know who the CEO is. Look and see if they have any news about them, see what's going on with the company, know what type of services that they offer. Are they local? Are they national? Are they international? You should want to know that anyway, because obviously you should have vetted this company before you applied to them because they made sense for your long-term goals. So definitely know about the company, but it's also going to be important when you get into the interview process and they start talking about the company and you may have some questions. It's important for you to be prepared. But again, we'll also discuss more about that tomorrow. Now, the job interview itself, obviously you're the focus. They will ask questions to try to figure out, like I said, information about you. One thing I am going to say about this, please make sure, guys, listen, listen, listen. Even though they're trying to check you out, obviously you're trying to check them out too. So, don't look at it in a one-sided way. Remember, you have your own business and you're in the business of you. So you need to make sure this is a good fit. Nothing destroys a career quicker than going to a company that's not a good fit for you. I've seen people actually quit careers because of companies. That's not how disheartening that is. To hate the work so much, you just leave the entire career, right? You don't want that. And a lot of that has to do with you choosing the right company. It's like choosing the right person, right? You can ruin everything, right? So you want to choose the right company. So it's not just about them looking at you, but it's also about you looking at them. Most times it will be face to face, but sometimes it won't be. Sometimes you'll have more than one person at these structured interviews, especially. We call those panel interviews. Maybe you have to meet with your immediate boss, but maybe you're going to be on a construction site and you may be working in the welding, but they also want you to meet with the general manager and they want you to meet with the cross-functional teams. Maybe you have to meet with the team that is finishing it. Maybe you're coming in with if you're in the welding, so you're probably coming in under pre-construction or right at the beginning, but maybe you also have to meet with the other teams, and you're going to have to work with them. So they want to have somebody from those respective teams meet with you. So for a number of reasons, you could be meeting with more than one person. I I like it. Some people, it makes them nervous. I'd rather get it over with. Like, I do not want to have to get dressed up, come drive all the way to your site and come here doing this more 2 or 3 times, only to be told, oh, you were such a great candidate. We're going to move with somebody else. Like, I don't need that drama. Just give it to me one time, but for some people, it makes them nervous. One good thing I will say about this, even if it's more than one person talking to you during this structured process, they still are going to ask the same set of questions. If it's 10 questions, they'll just give him 5 and they'll give her 5, but they're still going to ask the same 10 questions. Most times, though, um, if it is someone from a different department, they may just be there to ask you one or two questions that relate specifically to when you'll work with them, you know. So, don't be too nervous about these types of interviews, look at it, you don't have to come back twice, that's one way to look at it. You can ask the screener, the HR person, hey, will I be meeting with just, Sam Smith? Or she may mention, both Sam and Tori can't wait to meet you. And you may say, oh, is Tori also part of the team? Oh, what? And then she'll explain. Sometimes they explain, sometimes they don't. Remember, they do it so much, not to give any excuses for HR, but you have to manage them too, right? So if they're talking about Tori and Sam, yes, their emails may be in the follow-up, but you never know. You want to know who you're dealing with. So you said, well, you know, feel the person out, right? So I don't want to say ask too many questions, because obviously you can tell if somebody's being short and to the point and they just want to get over with, or if somebody's being conversational and the person is a little bit more communicative, and you feel like you can get some information out of them. Try to get what you can get, but don't overdo it, right? Don't overdo it, right? Because you're just trying to get a sense for what's happening. Like they may mention, oh yeah, we can't wait to bring you on because, you know, uh, David's been gone from that position for 3 months. You're like, oh my God, what am I walking into? Right? Let the person talk. If they want to talk, let them talk. But for the most part, it's your job to just try to figure out what the situation is, because you're trying to make sure it's a good fit for you. So you're meeting with Sam and Tori. You can go do some research to see who they are and what they are about. Right? All right. It's just to help you prepare. Now, when you do have that in-person meeting, obviously it's most times it could be at a corporate office. That's why you want to ask, because if it's an unstructured, it probably is a hint that it may not be at their main office unless you're in the VA program. Typically if it's a pet clinic or a pet shelter, you're going to meet at the office. But for the rest of us, it may or may not be. So if you want to ask the screener, if they say, oh, we want to love to move you forward, I'll send you an email. It's okay to say, will I be meeting at the main office? Because maybe the main office is down the street from your house. That's lucky for you. But then she may say, oh no, you're going to meet at our at our other campus. That could be 40 minutes away. So again, they don't always know your situation. Most times they don't. So it's good to try to get as much information as possible, because you could be in some type of remote location. Now, other times too, it may not even be in person, right? But for the most part, when we talk about remote, it will. And so that's why it's so important that you know where you're going, so that you can be on time, my friends. Make sure that you are early. You don't know what the traffic situation is going to be like, especially if they're going to be sending you somewhere that you've never been. Like, you don't want that drama. You do not want to be the person that shows up late. Do not show up late. I'm telling you right now, people judge you. I don't care what they say. I don't care how many, oh my God, it was the accident. It was this. It stands out. It's, first impression is a lasting impression. Don't be late no matter what. Do not be late unless, let it be something. I hate to say that, but just do not be late. I can tell you the number of times I've interviewed people just throughout my career. I remember the people that were late. I don't know why I remember it, but I think it has to do with just first impression is the lasting impression. I never forget, I interviewed this professor. He was a big time professor, at a college I won't name. And he was late. And not only was he late, he was lost and he was confused and he was sweating because he panicked, and he could not come off of that. So for the first 5 to 10 minutes of our interview, he's talking about how he got lost. He's sweating. We had to bring him water. I felt horrible for the guy. And I say we, because it was a panel interview. So now this guy's being judged by more, it was three of us. Y'all already know what happened, right? they couldn't move past it. I could have moved past it because I really needed that that position filled at the time. Um, but my boss, she couldn't move past it, because she was like, "What was that?" I was like, "Oh God, okay, I know this guy's not going to get the job." And it's something like that. Do people judge you first impression? They do, right? So not that wasn't the only reason he didn't get the job, but you just don't want that drama. There could be situations where you got to go through security and other protocols, getting the visitor's badge. So it's important that you just come early, right? That makes people feel like you really want to be there, that you were prepared. Like I said, there could be instances that you may meet remotely. Why would that ever be a thing for you guys? Well, if this company has a rule that everybody meets with the boss, or let's say everybody meets with that cross team uh, general contractor person, but he couldn't be at your initial interview, they may say, "Well, we just want you to jump on the video call really quickly with Tom because Tom wasn't able to make it." And you're like, "Oh, Lord, now I got to do a virtual." So there are instances where you may have to do a virtual. The screening interview could be virtual. So just prepare for that. Don't think because, hey, I know I'm in the tech field, I don't have to do this computer stuff. That's not true, my friends. It depends on the type of company that you work for, you know. So you may have to have a virtual interview. If the screener person says that you have to have a virtual interview, I'll send you the link. They'll say, pay attention to the link, guys, because y'all know it could be any type of link. It could be Google, it could be Microsoft Teams, it could be Big Blue Button, it could be Skype. You just never know. And so look, it could be Zoom. So when they send it to you, look in advance because you want to make sure you have that whatever software it is downloaded on your computer before the meeting. Again, you don't want to be the person that says, "Oh, I can't download it. I don't know how to do that." Learn how to do it. Don't don't say to the person, "Oh, I don't have that." Just please, 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 my friends, get some help, learn how to do it so you don't miss that opportunity. We already talked about telephone interviews. Very rarely any of you would have a telephone interview outside of the screening, with the exception, like I said again, of someone that maybe wants to just chit chat with you on the front end. There are people like that too. Some people are really big on having good camaraderie with their employers. I'm sorry, their employees. So that could happen. I've had people say, "Could we just chat for a bit? I just want to get a feel for you." And I roll my eyes. I'm gonna be honest with you because I'm not a big on talking to strangers all the time. So, but it does happen, right? So could there be a situation where you have to do a telephone interview for various reasons? There could be. In those situations, just try to be as animated as possible, guys. Like, you don't want the person to feel like you're disinterested. Some of us don't do well over the phone, right? Some of us don't have the type of energy or personality that translates well over, the phone. Sometimes you have to be in person to get a sense of who that person is. So some people find telephone interviews are negative. Some people, don't. I remember I almost had a job I didn't get because of a video interview, actually. I met in person for the first interview, and it was with my immediate boss, and she loved me to death. But then the CEO was like, well, he wanted to meet with me, as well. And I'm gonna tell you, it did not go well. And not to blame him or me, but if anybody that's ex-military or anybody ex-military have military people in their family, give me a thumbs up. But he was he was an ex-Marine, and I'm an ex-Army person. Okay, so y'all can agree, y'all might know what this was. And he's looking at me and I'm looking at him, right? You know what I'm saying? So he's looking stoic. I'm looking stoic. It's not like we're trying to look stoic, but it's part of who we are. And he's asking me questions. I'm answering it. And he's kind of giving me the once over. I'm giving him the once over. It was horrible. It was horrible. And so he went, it was horrible because even though I was, I could tell, I could tell a military person, by the way, and I could tell, he was trying to run the game of, oh, let me be, serious and size her up. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm sizing you up too, and he was like, "You sure you want her?" He went back to her and she was like, "Absolutely, I want her." Now, funny enough, we went on to be we really great friends because that was not friends, but we got along great. But I already knew what it was, and I was like, "Oh Lord," I just knew I wasn't gonna get it. So like this guy's like just asking me these questions and not responding. He's not telling me how he feels about it. It was funny. But I almost thought I didn't get that job, but you don't want that drama, but it does happen. Y'all, anybody in the military know, y'all know how we can do, right? So we talked about the video. All right, so that's it, guys. Like I said, I wanted to get you in and out. Tomorrow is going to be a little bit more in depth. Let me just warn you right now, because we're going to talk about a lot of different things. So please make sure that you plan accordingly for that. So I'll still try to be quick because I do know that you guys are starting your meetings with career services. So with that being said, here is your conference question for today. I just want to know, what is your most hated interview question and why? What is your most hated interview question and why? Now, if you've never had an interview, then just tell me what would be. We all have different questions we just dread. Oh my God, I hope they don't ask this, or I hate when they ask that. What question is that? And then you have an assignment too that is asking you to talk about a worst case interview scenario. So you're talking about, a really bad interview that you've had in the past. Like what made it horrible? What made it horrible for you? If you've never had an interview before, then just talk about what would be an embarrassing or a horrible situation for you. Maybe it could be you go to the wrong address. I know I've done that before. My gosh, something like that, right? So that's your two assignments for today. Please remember, if you weren't able to get that participation in because it was locked yesterday, I did open that back up for you so that you can get that for points. Other than that, my friends, please, participation, I've extended it to 5. I'm not extending it past 5. We are on week 2. That means everybody should know how to do participation by now. And I'm already giving you that extension. So please try to get it done by 5 p.m. Other than that, I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Have a great day. All right, bye-bye.